Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join Martin, Dave, Spencer and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
So welcome to another T2 Hubcast. It's me, Martin Johnson, and I'm with
Dave Pendleton.
Dave Pendleton. Welcome, Dave. How are you feeling?
Not bad, are you?
It's
sunny.
spring. It's spring. It's sunny. It's getting warmer. What more could we ask for? Okay. So, today's Hubcast, we are going to talk about customer service competencies. One of your favourite subjects, Dave, right?
Absolutely one of my favourite subjects, yeah. But also one of the subjects that gives me the most pain.
Yes. And probably one of the subjects that certainly our customers are inconsistent with. And that is even if they are focusing on it at all. What we observe is in training and development, and certainly in the whole area of sort of customer experience and customer service, the customer service sort of training process gets all of the limelight, and we don't think that organizations pay as much attention to the competencies, the overall competencies, not just from a process perspective or skills perspective, but the overall competencies, which includes the people skills, etc., that great customer service organizations, departments, and individuals need to focus on. You know, the inputs. We always talk about inputs versus outputs, right? The inputs of the role. So we wanted to jump on a Hubcast for any T2 Hub members who, if you're listening to this, you should be one. For any T2 Hub members, what's worth signposting it before we start is that there is a competency framework toolkit on the website, on the Hub, under the productivity tool section. So if you go to the bottom and scroll across, you'll see the customer service competency framework toolkit. That will have all of what we're going to talk about in there for you to use at your leisure. So after this Hubcast, we'd recommend you check it out and take a look. So Dave, just from your perspective, before I sort of come in there, we created a series of competency frameworks at T2, customer service being one of them. Why do we believe in them? Why do you think a competency framework is something that organizations should be deploying and should consider deploying at a high level?
Well, I guess cross-topic and cross-subject rather than just around customer service. I think the competency framework, certainly ours, because it's nice and straightforward and simple to understand and simple to use, is it gives you a very base benchmark of what good looks like. Once you go through the model and shaping process of understanding the 16 different areas that somebody needs to be strong at to be successful in this role, and you've got measurement capability, every single time you sit down with those people, you can measure them against exactly the same criteria. It's not open to interpretation. It's not down to somebody's opinion or perception. It's very, very rigid in terms of what we're measuring against, which then, of course, combats the usual argument around consistency and fairness. It's consistent because it's always the same. So therefore, I understand what I'm being measured against, and I understand that that's what I need to be able to perform in those measurements elements to be successful in my role. So that's what makes it fair.
Yeah. And how would you answer the question that we get time and time again, which is, well, does it matter what your product or service is or your organization is? Does customer service competencies change depending on whether you're in a finance organization or a technology organization or a retailer or whatever it might be? What would your answer be to that? Because what we've incorporated into our model is the 16 universal competencies across 4 categories, which we're going to share with the listeners in a minute. But we're really of the opinion, aren't we, Dave, that it doesn't really matter where you're applying service. This competency framework, the product or service, is almost irrelevant. This is just the whole methodology of what needs to go into a great service-led organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It makes perfect sense. And I think in terms of the inputs, I think our 16 core competencies or 16 core inputs, will work across any business that is delivering any kind of front-facing service.
Yeah.
100%. I think the only thing that needs to be considered as I guess the other side of the process is the outcome stuff, the resolutions. The resolutions, of course, are business and industry specific.
Yeah.
And that's the other side. And that's not the side that we deal with, because I guess we would make the assumption that the business or company would already have that sort of stuff in hand.
Yeah. So, for example, and we'll come on to this and this will make sense, but it's a great point, Dave. Our core competencies of the customer service framework is the inputs. But yes, some of the detail underneath that will vary from customer to customer or from organization to organization.
Sure.
So for example, one of the core competencies of the 16 core competencies is to effectively deal with complaints and issues. Now, that as a competency, right, is still universally relevant. It just means that some of the peripherals and the details of that will vary from organization to organization. It just means you've got to build knowledge in that.
Sure.
All right, so for the listeners then, let's start by going through the 4 categories, and we'll then go through the 16 competencies that we see are universally relevant in great customer service operators and managers and departments and organizations. So the model's simple, and as you'll see on the hub, if you download this or if you look into it, all of our competency frameworks, whether it's a sales competency framework, a leadership, a customer service, we split the competencies up into 4 categories, high-level categories, which are skills, the skills you need to do the job. Traits, the traits you need to possess or have formed or developed over time, which as a human being, which will naturally lend themselves to that role or to the nature of that role. The 3rd category is knowledge. So, of course, having the skills and the traits is one thing, but you do need to have a sufficient amount of knowledge in your sphere of expertise. And final category is process. As much as we love it, like it, hate it, whatever it might be, we need to, certainly in a service environment, you need to be able to fully understand and be able to execute upon the process required to deliver what you do. So 4 categories of the competency framework: skills, traits, knowledge, and process. And what we then have is we have elements or subheadings under those categories, or the competencies themselves. The actual competencies under the categories. So let's start with skills, Dave. Under the skills category, we have we have questioning, active listening, communication, objection handling, and conflict management. So there are 5 competencies under the skills in the customer service competency framework. Now, people listening, Dave, might be going, there's far more than that, but these are the 5 universally relevant, which if you can master, if you can be somebody who can ask intelligent and timely, well-placed questions, you can truly listen or actively listen. You're present, not just waiting for your turn to talk. You have well-rounded overall great communication skills. You can handle objections effectively, and if you get into it, which you do in customer service, like you can conflict manage. Those 5 things will put you in great stead. Would you add anything?
Yeah, I think actually I would challenge that perspective that there are far more in terms of skills. I think if you started to list them by brainstorming, I think you could probably intrinsically link every other one that you came into back to the 6 that we've come up with.
Yeah,
I absolutely do.
Yeah, so that you could almost put them into buckets, and they would all fall into communication, conflict management, the ability to question, the ability to listen. Absolutely. Yeah. For example, and we'll come on to it, the link into it. You could have something which comes under active listening. And therefore, you could categorize everything by these 5 competencies. You're absolutely right. So they're skills. Let's go on to traits. Traits, what's the difference? A skill, just to differentiate, a skill is an ability or proficiency that can be learned over time through practice, repetition, and training. Yeah. It's something we can develop, and it gets better with repetition and practice, or it actually decreases if we neglect it. But a skill is something that can be learned. Sure. A trait, however, it's almost like part of our DNA.
Pre-programmed.
It is. And through years, we won't go into it on this hubcast, but through years of development and anchors and experiences and nature versus nurture, we start to form our view of the world.
Yeah.
We start to form our personality styles and our characteristics, and we inherit a set of traits that define us, more or less define us. Now, it's not impossible to ditch a trait that's not serving you well or to form a new one, but it's more of a complete mindset and behavioral change, and happens over a period of time. It's not as simple as learning a skill, but traits are pretty deep seated, right? We're pretty deep seated. So there's many traits, but the 4 traits we have in our competency framework that we observe in great service people and great people who thrive in a service. And that's the difference, Dave.
That's the thing, thrive.
People who thrive and enjoy.
Absolutely.
And get self-fulfillment from being in a service role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the traits they possess are fairness, empathy, the ability to truly look at a situation from somebody else's perspective, integrity, which is an important one in service. Do what you say you will do, first time, every time. And the 4th one is clock speed, which for the listeners out there, we define as the ability to think on your feet. So a trait that allows you to process that information, think about it, not too much, but pretty quickly, and then respond accordingly. It takes a certain level of emotional intelligence to have clock speed, right? But clock speed, because quite often in service, we need to think on our feet and respond. Nothing is worse than somebody in service who is not responding to you in your moment of need, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Time is of the essence. Would you say any comments on traits and why they stand out as the 4 in our competency framework?
Yeah, I think, we've had this discussion many times, and certainly when we were building the competency frameworks, that certainly from our perspective and from observations and from hundreds of hours experience from my perspective in terms of being involved in service and the delivery of service, traits for me is absolutely the most important of all 4 categories of competency, because as you rightly say, people can adopt new traits, and they can adopt new traits through things like training and coaching and mentoring. But if a trait isn't absolutely pre-programmed and natural, it will only ever be a half skill.
Yeah.
And when it's only ever a half skill, it's only half effective.
Yeah. And
it will probably be implemented only half of the time.
And to your point, a half skill would contribute to it still means it's a conscious effort to do
Correct,
it.
yes.
The difference between skills and traits is skills are always a conscious decision or conscious
Traits are
action.
unconscious.
Traits happen unconsciously and habitual. It's like in your DNA.
Sure.
And that's why people with the right traits, and to your point, it's the most important ingredient of the competency framework. It's happening unconsciously and habitually without even thinking about it. And that's why it's powerful.
Yeah, 100%.
We'll come back to traits, because I'm going to, what we'll do at the end, Dave, is we'll just focus in on those 4 traits: fairness, empathy, integrity, and clock speed, and just give them a little bit more, give people and listeners a little bit more around what we mean by that. Okay, 3rd category is knowledge, as we said earlier. So we've got 4 competencies in the competency framework under knowledge that we observe in great service teams and service personnel. So this is, what do they have to carry a high level of knowledge in to execute the job? Well, they have to have a high level of knowledge in their product or service. Might seem really obvious, right? But you if you're gonna offer customer service or problem resolutions or whatever it might be, you have to understand your product and service inside out. You have to have a high degree of knowledge in what you do. The second one is the customer. You either have to have a high level of knowledge of the customer or have access to something in the moment that can give you the knowledge on the customer that allows you to speak to them on their terms, in their world, and fill them full of confidence. And sometimes with this, you need great CRM systems. You need great that you can pull up a customer's details, full history, etc., in a moment and start communicating with them in a way which is meaningful. Policies and procedures is the 3rd one. So you, as well as having knowledge of your products and services, you have to, as a service handler or a service agent, have and this is it. It's not reading off a manual or checking back on the intranet. It's ingrained in your brain the policies and procedures for at least the top complaints or the top issues that a customer might be facing. So you can that plays into clock speed, right? You can act in the moment.
100%.
You're all over it from the start, right? You fill people full of confidence when you have an ingrained knowledge of your policies and procedures. And the last one is complaints and issues. And what we mean by this is great service agents understand the most likely and most common complaints and issues customers will either come in with or experience. And therefore, it feeds into all of the other stuff. If you have a really deep knowledge of what is likely to happen or what typically customers struggle with or maybe calling in with for further help or information, you can get on the front foot. You can become very well versed in it. But either way, what we're saying is you're not there to sit on a desk or on a phone or in a branch and escalate every single customer interaction. Great service handlers can field the majority of stuff themselves. We're not saying escalation isn't part of it. We'll come on to that. But great service handlers go out their way above and beyond their training to build their knowledge in their products and service, their customers, policies and procedures, and the most common complaints and issues.
Absolutely.
And finally, process. Process is the final category of the Customer Service Competency Framework. And there's only 3 competencies in here because, like you say, Dave, depending on organizations, everybody's different in this area, but most things can come under these 3 competencies. They have to have a level of competency on the whole customer service cycle. And what we mean by this is every organization has a different 5-step process or 3-step process, what we call the customer service cycle, from picking up the phone to clarifying the problem to whatever, resolution to whatever it may be. But great customer service people know the cycle inside out. They know the journey they need to go on before they wrap that engagement up. The second one is systems. We touched on it earlier, you need to understand the process around the systems, the technology you use. So things are done properly, things are documented, things are closed off, right?
Yep.
Whether it's a ticketing system or a CRM system or whatever it might be. And finally, the final competency under process is escalation. Great customer service people do all the things we're talking around first, but they know where it's both relevant and at the right time to escalate the situation. And they do that very, very well. And it's part of the process.
Well, I think as well, there's not just the escalation in terms of, an emotionally elevated customer and so on and so forth that's making unreasonable demands. I think rarely these days do we ever come across a one contact resolution customer service agent.
Yeah.
So we make one call in and we get the resolution that we need. So much more frequently, the agent, they might have done a great job with us, a world-class job, but more than frequently, they'll have to pass that to somebody else to carry out the next part of the resolution, or to authorize the resolution, or to check the details of delivery towards the resolution, or whatever it might be. So in terms of the escalation, it's just what is the next part of the process away from this agent, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And they know where to go, when to deploy it, when it's the right time.
How long it's going to take.
It's not too early. They're not just chucking everything up to escalation and not driving any accountability.
Sure.
But likewise, they're not keeping a disgruntled customer, communicating with them when it's heading nowhere. They know when it's the right time and when it's most appropriate.
Totally.
So they're the 4 categories: skills, traits, knowledge, and process. 16 universal competencies within each. In our model, as you'll see in the toolkit, there is worksheets and toolkits and templates to score each service agent or advisor or whatever you call them in your organization based on the 16 competencies. And there's 4 level of competency, Dave, from I think it's awareness, working, practitioner and expert. Yeah. Dave's looking at me there because I should talk about knowing your knowledge inside. All right, I'm sort of at a moment there, right? So awareness, working, practitioner and expert. And that's just 4 levels of competency, right? But you get to score people on the 16. They come out with the results, which will say they are strong in some areas, they are not so strong in other areas, or it's an area to build on. And you'll come out with a nice fancy spider diagram, which shows you a visual of where their areas to build on are. And that helps us develop and engage our service agents in the right and most appropriate places going forward, right? Because service agent or customer service advisor 1 will be different to customer service advisor 2. They might have complete opposite strengths and weaknesses, right, or areas to build on. And that's the value. It's consistent across all people, but it gives you at an individual level a more bespoke and personalized development opportunity. So let's come back to traits, Dave. Just on traits, we talked about fairness, empathy, integrity, and clock speed. Just give the listeners a bit more of what we mean by each on the descriptors. Because you said traits, in your opinion, are the most important part of the competency framework. I mean, it's all important, but...
No, I absolutely think so. Yeah, and when I've worked in a service environment, it was a relatively high-end service environment for a global car manufacturer. When I was writing the personal profiles for HR to be able to start recruiting, I did say that these are the most important things that you need to recruit against, because we've got the ability, we've got an internal training team who can give them the ability around skills, knowledge, and process. And then through time, they will gain more knowledge and more skills, make them more knowledgeable and more skilled. But they've got to have these base traits for them to fit into the business and for them to deliver even a base level of service when they're brand new on the phones.
And that's a top tip for anyone listening, or any customer service managers or whoever might be involved in or responsible for it. Hire the right people based on the traits in the competency framework, and you can skill them.
Absolutely.
You can skill the rest, the skills, the knowledge, the process, that can all be learned and enhanced over time through practice, training, and repetition. But you can't hire someone in and then 3 months later give them a personality transplant. It's harder to do, right? So this is why we're saying hire on traits and trait. So go on, Dave. We talked about the right traits for a service professional. Just talk through them again and just give a bit more of a deeper understanding of them.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, the first one we've got is fairness. What's right and what's wrong. And more than frequently, well, I would say every single time a customer contacts a service advisor or a service handler, it's because they've got a problem. They feel hard done by in some way or another that's centered around the business or service that your company provides. So they're already aggravated. And me personally, when I've phoned up and I'm aggravated with customers, with companies, which does happen, as you well know, I've said to people, can you not understand how I feel? And would you not feel the same way if this was to happen to you? And quite frequently, you met with the response of, I couldn't answer that. I can't answer that. I couldn't answer that because, I work for so-and-so, so-and-so. And I think that's an absolute crock. I really do. I want you to be a human. I want you to understand how I feel. And do you know what? Say yes. Do you know what? In your situation, I probably would feel the same, because that would do two things for me. It would make me understand that they're not just reeling off a script, that they're not in a transactional environment, and that they are a human by saying, do you know what? I think I would feel the same.
It would diffuse you.
And it would absolutely diffuse me. That's the second thing it would do. It would diffuse my level of emotional elevation to a certain extent, because I know I'm dealing with a human.
Yeah, and we do a lot of work on print and unconscious motivators, and there's certain motivators which will lend itself to fairness and right and wrong. And just our descriptor under fairness for the listeners is an individual who believes in a fair and just world. They stick to the rules, because obviously that's important in service, understand the importance of structure, and try to see the best in others. That's what we mean, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Empathy.
Yeah. Empathy. Now we always extend, I guess, the dictionary meaning of empathy, because we deal with humans. That's our core business, helping humans progress and be better, a better version of themselves, as we say. Now, for me, empathy, it does say in our descriptor, an individual demonstrates an understanding of other people's situations from their perspective, and in turn can relate to them. I think that's great, and it's the usual kind of meaning of empathy, but I would extend that to saying when one human genuinely cares about another human's feelings. And I think that's a real key aspect of delivering world-class customer service. When you really care that I'm fed up, when you really care that I'm really, really annoyed and frustrated, when you care, it comes across, particularly when it's sincere, not a learned or adopted trait, which you can feel as well as a human.
Yeah.
And that, again, will diffuse me instantly. When somebody says to me, I understand exactly how you feel, and I would feel the same in your position, and guess what? I'm going to help you work this through today.
Yeah. And our descriptor on this in the competency framework is under empathy is an individual who demonstrates an understanding of other people's situations from their perspective and in turn relate to them.
Yeah.
But more so going deeper than that for you, it's when it's truly sincere, you can tell the difference and it makes the difference. And therefore, recruiting people with the natural trait of empathy, with an amiable person who has a very strong connection to other human beings and feelings and emotions and relationships, that serves people well. And you know what? There's roles out there where people who we're describing don't thrive when it's very task and goal focused or process driven, and you're overly emotional or connecting with humans. You don't thrive in that role, but where they do thrive is in service roles because it's right. Integrity.
Yeah, integrity. I mean, the amount of times, I think about myself as a customer, and I relate to this all the time. The amount of times that I've been promised resolutions or further contact through escalation, or an email to confirm something by customer service handlers, I've probably lost count of. And I will probably say 95% of those times, not one of those examples has come to fruition.
Yeah.
Because the amount of people that promise you things that never materialize is quite astonishing.
And you know what? We do this, and I'm gonna blow our own trumpet. We do this very well at T2 with customers. I'm very, very hot on this. You have to deliver what you say you will.
Yeah.
You have to do what you commit to doing. And when you forget or you don't follow up with that email or those documents, or you don't, do what you say you're going to do, integrity very quickly goes, and then the whole relationship starts to break down. And
you lose faith, you lose trust.
Yeah,
there's no rapport. And the next time you phone, you're skeptical because you don't believe what they're going to say.
It's very difficult to get it back once it's gone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Under integrity descriptor in the competency framework, we describe it as an individual who does the right thing every time. Someone who will always follow up and do what they say they will do.
Absolutely.
And that is huge for your brand and for your organization. So we've got to have that. Right, last one, clock speed. We touched upon it earlier, but again, let's recap what we mean by clock speed as a natural trait in people, a natural characteristic.
Yeah, I think clock speed is directly linked to active listening. Many times, we try to describe what people try to describe what active listening is, and it's just being present. It's understanding what that other human is saying rather than thinking about your response.
Yeah.
Which is frequently the case in a lot of the aspects of work that we work in. I've just experienced it myself. And when somebody has the ability, the naturally programmed ability to listen to what you're saying and respond accordingly, appropriately, accurately, and quickly to what I say, gives me an awful lot of trust in that human being, because to me, they feel credible.
Absolutely. And you know what? This is one of the only four. So in fairness, empathy, and integrity, we believe that they are three traits that are triggered from nurture, from your parents in your early social years, the events.
Yeah.
You can develop fairness, empathy, and integrity from a nurture perspective, right? But clock speed for me is partly nature, right? We have brains, certain people who are wired in the brain to process information incredibly quickly and respond accordingly. So it is a trait. It can be as a result of nature, but there's also this element of some people have it and some people don't, Dave. And that's why you're saying you've got to recruit on the right traits, because if you can recruit somebody with clock speed, this is in the sales as well, in a sales or customer service role, their ability to process information accurately, understand it, interpret it, and respond quickly and accordingly is great. And it's not with everybody naturally, right?
No.
So we've got to try and test for that in the interview process.
Which is relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the competency framework terms, there are clock speed around certainly things like products and service and the service cycle and things like that. However, when you are interviewing potential candidates, when you ask them a question, if they start umming and erring and looking to the sky and saying, "Oh, that's a great question,"
they don't.
Just give me a minute. That's not demonstrating clock speed. And we're not bothered if the answer's right or wrong. That's irrelevant whether the answer to the question is right or wrong. It's just the ability to answer as accurately as they think is possible, as quickly and appropriate as possible.
And that's why in the interview stuff we do, we talk about the three types of questions. They're designed to test for clock speed in that.
Correct.
Right, Dave, we've got 50 seconds left. So I think we've just about squeezed that in there. So just to recap, use the competency framework, check out the 4 categories and the 16 universal competencies. It's on the T2 Hub. Look at the toolkits you've got and start driving your hiring, your developing, your measuring, your reward and recognition based on these competencies. And if we focus on the inputs, i.e. competencies, then the outputs will come. And that's what the great customer service organizations do.
And don't make your customer service people part of a tick box process. They are intrinsically linked to the success of your business.
Dave Pendleton, great finish. Thank you very much. See you soon.